Michael Myers. My all-time favourite slasher villain. And not just because he has the best first name anyone could possibly ever have, ever. So why is he my favourite? Seriously, why? I've always wondered. There's got to be a reason. So let's find out together! It all started in 1978 when John Carpenter released Halloween. And it was a success. Seriously though, I know it wasn't the first slasher movie, but it definitely helped influence many to come. Jason Voorhees certainly springs to mind. The movie kicks off in Haddonfield on a quiet Halloween night, as we see through the eyes of a young Michael Myers, and everything is completely normal. He is spending Halloween being ignored by his babysitter, who just so happens to be his sister Judith, but she seems more interested in pretending her boyfriend is a bouncy castle. Oh God, who would do that with a bouncy... Why would I even think of that? Right, so her boyfriend leaves and Michael kills her. Yep, he just picks up a knife and a mask and kills her. Not entirely sure why he would be fixated on staring at the knife, though. Yes, I know it was an artistic decision, but still. He then heads outside as his parents return, who just seem to stand there staring at him. Well, maybe they are saying something, but the camera's pulling away and all we can hear is the music. But what gets me is the way the mother is just stood there with her hands in her coat pockets. Like she is more disappointed in him than shocked. Oh, Michael, not this again. This really has to stop, you know. You are on a final warning, young man. Oh, well, Peter, you better get the shovel. Although what is much more likely is they thought it was a dumb Halloween prank. Alrighty, we jump forward to 1978, where Donald Pleasance's Dr. Sam Loomis, yes that is a Psycho reference, is heading to Smith's Grove Sanitarium, where Michael Myers has been held for the past 15 years. But when they arrive, they discover that Michael has broken free and released a bunch of inmates. And then he steals their car and escapes. So given that Michael has been locked away in this sanitarium since he was 6 years old, how does he know how to drive?
Sam Haddonfield is 150 miles away from here. Now, for God's sakes, he can't drive a car. He was doing very well last night.
Yeah, they never actually give us an answer to this question. It's like the movie is so dumb that it doesn't know how to explain away the fact that he can drive, but at the same time they are smart enough to recognise that it is a legitimate question. Loomis is adamant that Michael is heading to Haddonfield, but no one else seems to believe him, thinking that Michael is just some nut that is wandering around. So it is up to Loomis to warn the people of Haddonfield what is coming to their town. But let's forget such horrors for a moment. This is Laurie Strode, played by Jamie Lee Curtis. She is a student and a babysitter. And throughout her day she becomes increasingly paranoid as she spots strange cars and shapes watching her in the distance, only to disappear when she looks away for just a moment. Loomis arrives at Haddonfield and begins his search by checking the grave of Michael's sister, and when he discovers the gravestone is missing, that confirms it. So he talks to the town sheriff, played by Charles Cyphers, and tells him about Michael and the danger his town is facing. And I love that while he is standing there, Michael just drives by behind him. It's a small thing, but I like it. Right, let's talk about the soundtrack. It is one of the most simplistic soundtracks ever created, yet it adds suspense and a creepy atmosphere to any scene it is used in. And it is used heavily in the first 30 minutes, which is mostly Michael stalking Laurie. And I cannot think of a different soundtrack that would do a better job at cementing the creepy tone that these scenes are going for. But back to the movie. Darkness descends and Loomis brings the sheriff with him to check the old Myers house, and they find a dead animal.
It's still warm. He got hungry.
Oh, lovely. They examine his sister's bedroom and they get startled by falling down bits of house. Loomis immediately draws his gun and realises that it was nothing to worry about, but that demonstrates his fear of Michael. Loomis tells the sheriff about how he met Michael, that after he killed his sister he spent 7 years trying to reach him, and in the process realised something, that Michael was beyond help, there was nothing left. And he realised the danger there and then spent another 8 years trying to keep him locked away from the world. And I really like this scene. And what makes it even better is that it's essential to the movie, because Michael is silent. He cannot tell his story, so they needed someone else to tell it for him. And that person is Loomis. And all throughout this movie, the script and Donald Pleasance's delivery of the script are both 100%. There are so many movies out there where good acting eases poor writing, or a good script pulls up a shoddy performance, but definitely not here. The way Loomis talks about Michael goes beyond him simply telling the sheriff that Michael is plain and simply evil. But you feel his fear and paranoia while he tells the sheriff of the 15 years he has known Michael. It is almost like whenever he goes to talk about it, he is fighting that shiver running down his spine, and he's only just managing to hold it all together because in Loomis's mind, Michael being loose in the world is the worst thing that could ever happen. Loomis believes that Michael will return to the house, so he waits for him there. But Michael is busy at the moment observing Laurie and her friends, only this time he gets interrupted. Well, there's nothing to worry about here then. The dog will be fine. The dog is always fine in these kind of movies. Laurie's friend Annie has been babysitting as well, and she is fed up with it and gives Lindsay to Laurie to watch over. Which means Annie is now free to go fool around with some guy, only she doesn't quite make it that far. Hey, 51 minutes in and we finally get to see adult Michael Myers kill someone. Hey, I'm not complaining, the movie's done a really good job at filling in the time before people start dying. A lot of films suffer in that department, although I will admit it's usually sequels that fall into that particular trap. Michael carries Annie's body into the house, only Tommy, which is the kid that Laurie's babysitting, happened to be looking out of the window at that moment, and freaks out. But Laurie just tells him to stop it, thinking it is just his imagination. And here is the only scene in the movie that I would describe as being even slightly funny. A few kids are daring their friend to go into the old Myers house, so Loomis devises a way to stop them.
Hey, Lonnie, get your ass away from there.
You know, Friday the 13th's Crazy Ralph could learn a thing or two from Loomis, because that was a lot more effective than just running up to someone and going, "Doomed! You're all doomed!" But anyway, before Annie died, she had a plan. A nice social gathering with some of her friends. But since Annie is a little on the dead side of things, Linda and Bob arrive to an empty house. Which means sex. Which means death. But Michael has fun with this one. He kills Bob downstairs, then stands there admiring his handiwork for a bit. To be fair, if I managed to pin something that weighs as much as a fully grown person to a wall with just a knife, I'd probably be very proud of myself as well. Michael then puts a sheet over his head and toys with Linda.
What's the matter? Can I get your ghost, Bob?
It really wasn't that funny. Michael strangles her to death while Laurie listens on the phone. Unaware of what is going on but growing increasingly suspicious, she goes over the road to take a quick look. And she finds a lovely display that Michael has left for her. As you would expect, she then freaks out. Okay, what opened that door? Is Michael's will for things to happen just so strong he can open doors without touching them? Is this going to spin off into, ooh, telekinesis, Michael? Ooh, this actually looks like me doing an advert for some weird show. Could work. Telekinetic Michael. Okay, now that is a cool image. Michael's mask on a pure dark background. It looks awesome. However, I do wish they hadn't have altered the music to give significance to Michael's mask appearing. I mean, it didn't really spoil any surprise because we knew he was going to appear there, it was just too obvious. But I think a deviation from the music did cheapen it a little. And that stab! She didn't even have to move to avoid it, he just missed. Michael, are you even trying? She escapes the house and runs for help, but the neighbours ignore her, so she is forced to return to Tommy and Lindsay. She sends the kids upstairs and tries to call for help, but then she discovers that the phone isn't working, which is when she spots the open window. Oh bloody hell, Michael, you missed again! It's like you want to kill her, but you can't for some reason. Either that or you're just really bad at what you do when it comes to the final girl. Then again, what killer isn't? She stabs him with a knitting needle, but that doesn't keep him down for long. Maybe this will do it. Nope, that didn't do it either. Well, luckily the kids ran out of the house screaming and Loomis spotted them, and he showed up just in time to do this. Well, I think that ought to do it until the next movie. So Michael's body disappears almost as soon as it hit the ground. Halloween! Okay, maybe this was a bit too much. Anyway, Halloween, my favourite slasher movie starring my favourite slasher villain. And I think we found out why. And it certainly isn't the death scenes. They actually leave a lot to be desired. I get that this film was going for a less is more approach, and I cannot deny that it works, so don't get me wrong. I'm not saying it's a bad thing, just that I personally like more elaborate death scenes in slasher movies. Now the music definitely helps, but what I think it comes down to is the mask. The black, emotionless, empty eyes. And yes, I know it's because you can't actually see the eyes, which I think is the key. If you see someone's eyes, you see emotion. Remove them, and you are left with emptiness. Jason Voorhees, Freddy Krueger, they both embody rage. You see it all over them. But Michael? He is hollow and about as far from being human as you can get, since he, in this movie at least, is not driven by emotion, but rather a mysterious need to kill. And I think that is why he stands out to me. Also, fun fact, it's a William Shatner Star Trek mask spray painted white. As for the acting, it's pretty good. Michael Myers is played by a total of 5 people, mostly by Nick Castle, but when he's unmasked, Tony Moran takes on the role. Tommy Lee Wallace was Michael while props were being broken. Then stuntman James Winburn got his turn. And even co-writer Deborah Hill put on the mask, but only for one shot as no one else was available at the time. As for speaking roles, it comes down to 2 performances. Donald Pleasance, which I think I've covered pretty well already, and Jamie Lee Curtis. She portrays a very likeable, responsible character that you want to see survive. But who is she? Who is Laurie Strode? He didn't kill her outright like everyone else. Why is that? Well, we do eventually find out, but not from this movie. Laurie is his younger sister. Which certainly explains the obsession, because as a franchise on the whole, he is about trying to kill any and all relatives he has. But why? Well, I prefer not to have a reason, because the reason we do eventually get is, well, let's just say it's better to not have a reason. Okay, let's try to forget everything we know about Halloween that is outside of this movie. This movie on its own, what do we know? Michael was a normal child, presumably, and one day changed drastically and murdered his sister. Loomis is determined to see Michael either dead or locked up. Michael's parents disappeared from the rest of the movie with no explanation. Perhaps they died of some other cause in that 15-year gap. Michael has an obsession with Laurie and wants to display her friends' bodies around her with the gravestone of his sister as the centerpiece, but they never explain this obsession. He repeatedly fails to kill her. This could be rooted in his obsession or just following the trope of the final girl. The movie leaves it wide open for a sequel, so perhaps they intentionally left unanswered questions in the movie, or the writing just wasn't up to scratch. So yes, we do know why he is obsessed with her, but we do not know it from this movie alone. So that means when you finish watching this movie for the first time without any foreknowledge, you are left with two giant questions. Who is Laurie Strode to him? And how does he know how to drive?
Maybe someone around here gave him lessons.
Either way, I love this movie because the good definitely outweighs the bad. You have been watching Good or Bad, and I hope you have a happy Halloween in a little under a month's time. Bye! You know, Friday the 13th's Crazy Ralph could learn a thing or two from Loomis, because that was a lot more effective than just running up to someone and going, "Doomed!" Well, that was a fail.